Not everyone has the time or patience for 7 years with a therapist, especially when they have to deal with the problem every day. Luckily, our expert today has a 1-hour fix. Welcome to the Just Dumb Enough podcast, a show that acknowledges no one is always an expert by dispelling misconceptions with real experts. I'm your host as always, Colton Petrie. My guest today is Andrew Hahn. Andrew is the creator of life-centered therapy and has 30 years of experience solving the unsolvable psychosomatic and psychiatric mysteries that plague other specialties. He gives an excellent breakdown of how to use it even if you want to work on your own problems in your own time by yourself. Let's hear our own story. Welcome to the show, Andy Hahn.
Thank you, Colton. Welcome to the show, too.
Yes, thank you. I never get welcome to my own show. Why don't you introduce yourself a little bit for the people out here?
Okay, my name is Andy Hahn. My data is I'm a licensed clinical psychologist, and I am the founder of what's called life-centered therapy, which is a very edgy way of doing all kinds of healing work. And I'm the co-author of a book called The 1 Hour Miracle, which I'm happy to share about. And I'm just very happy to be here, and I love being idiots together.
Fantastic. We're in the right place. So what got you into psychology to start with?
Well, what got me into psychology probably to start with was two things. The first is I was the kind of person that I love people and I'm interested in life. And I'm the kind of person that if it was the right circumstance, we could sit together and meet for the first time and you could say, how could you know me as well as my best friend who I've had forever? Because I just really love people and I love getting to know them and I love sharing myself. So it seemed like a natural thing. Plus I thought it'd be an unbelievably creative way of being because you sit with somebody and all you have is everything you know and everything they know and whatever happens between the two of you. So on one level, that was what got me into psychology. Another level was my mother was a psychologist. My father was a lawyer. I took both the GREs and the LSATs, and I test very well, and I screwed up the LSATs, and I said it's because I don't want to be a lawyer. I want to be a psychologist. And I'm ecstatically happy, even though I probably would not have been as happy if what I was doing now, what I was learning then is what I was doing now, but what I'm doing now is quite different from what I learned in graduate school, even though I have a very powerful foundation in relatively traditional psychology.
Yeah. And it seems like, kind of the traditional psychology is this very big, broad field. What made you kind of start looking at there needs to be something new here?
Simple. People weren't getting the results. People were suffering. And I knew I'm going to be crass about it. I knew I was very good and I knew that they could get better results. And I said, I trust them. So there must be something better out there. And then I started to find it. And I think what we found is truly it makes me cry. I get to see things that are truly miraculous a lot. And I get to see people be free of suffering in ways that when I was in graduate school would have seemed almost biblical. Now I get to witness them and experience them, so we can have that happen today.
That's incredible. So where did you start? Did you start looking at what wasn't working and just try and tweaking it into functional?
Kind of. That's a simple question, but not a simple answer. I realized, if I'm going to jump way ahead, I realized that people had one problem, basically, which was that if you think about traditional psychology, traditional psychodynamic psychology, people say that the biggest problem for you is that you repeat the past, essentially. That's what they'd say. And so they'd say if you could talk about it enough, you might be able to do something about it. Well, that struck me as being trickle-down therapy, sort of like trickle-down economics. So I said, that can't be the right way to do it, to talk about it. And then I said something simple that I can tell your audience in 1 minute about why I think people come to therapy, what therapy is, and how it works. And so I'll make it simple. I think people come to therapy for exactly what I said. There's only one reason. I don't care what you're suffering about. If you're suffering, it could be something physical like chronic pain or chronic fatigue or autoimmune disease, or mental like anxiety, or emotional like depression, or relational like the same damn bad relationship over and over again, or spiritual like alienation, or cultural like bullying. And I think there's only one reason that people suffer, which is what we call trauma. And my definition of trauma is very simple. It's something that you can't take in stride. If you can't take something in stride and handle it, it's trauma. If you can take it in stride and handle it, you're free. So I would say the reason people come for therapy and they suffer is something couldn't be handled. All therapy is, when you strip it away of everything else, is mastering what couldn't be handled. If you can master everything, then anything could happen and you could say, it's not a big deal. I mean, even if from a human point of view, it's a very big deal, right? So, I mean, if you think in our Judeo-Christian culture, what do I mean? I mean, like, you look at Jesus right before he's crucified, he's screaming at his father, right? He says, why have you forsaken me? I was a Jewish. I mean, he's showing us as an exemplar what it means not to be able to take something in stride. He knows what's going to happen. He says, I'm reactive. But when he's getting crucified, he says, I commend my soul unto you. He's no longer reactive. He says, they're killing a body, but they're not killing me. I'm just the one, I'm the experiencer, not the thing being experienced. And that's all you have. If you could always be the experiencer and not the experienced, if you could always be the one bearing witness without identifying, you'd be the Buddha, you'd be Christ, you'd be Kuan Yin. And I think it's simple, so simple to know how to do that. You could teach a smart little kid, which is when something can't be handled, which leads to an interesting thing, which is like every discomfort you have is simply the story of something that couldn't be taken in stride. And everything that can't be taken in stride has an associated discomfort. And what happens is we unconsciously live out echoes of that discomfort story over and over and over again. And that's why people come to therapy, because they're living out echoes of whatever that discomfort is. So all I'm going to say to you is, if you could find the discomfort, which everybody can do, and you could choose to become it in the same way that an actor chooses to fully embody a role and says, I can fully choose to be that, and I can bear witness to it, and I can bring it all kinds of acceptance, but it's not who I am, you're free, because you no longer are it, you are the one experiencing it. So I'll tell you what I mean. Let's suppose you're in my office. I'll be quick about this. You're in my office, a motorcycle backfires, you have a panic attack. All right? But really having a panic attack. And I say, Colton, when you're having this panic attack that you think is you, what's happening in the body? And you say, my heart's pounding fast. And I'd say, Colton, you are not having a panic attack. Someone whose name is heart pounding fast is having a panic attack. Your little toe is just fine, so it can't be you. And it's not even a part of you. It was born in a moment. You were born in a moment. It's come to share a story. You have a story, but your story and its story is not the same story. But you've been living out an echo. So we know you have a clue about what its problem is, which is it has something to do with this panic attack. So you say, my heart's pounding fast. So here's what you're going to do, Colton. You're going to become heart pounding fast. You're going to choose to bring all your awareness there. And you're going to choose to become it from the inside out. And then whatever you do, you won't be identified with it anymore. So even if you're very kinesthetic and you go, oh my God, I'm going to, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, you no longer will be that soldier that you've been living out for the last 20 years because you've chosen to become him. You have remembered him, as opposed to he was dismembered and split off and you've been living out his story. So the second you remember him, you no longer are him. You're the one who said, I've chosen to be you, and I'm here with you, and I can accept you, but I'm no longer unconsciously going to live out your story. You've been trying to help me remember what happened, but now I remember. And if that's the only reason, you'll scream, yell, kick, whatever, and if you need something as that soldier, I'll give it to you. And at the end of that, if that's the only reason you're having panic attacks, I will guarantee you that the next time the motorcycle backfires, you'll say, I remember what happened to a soldier that was a younger me in Afghanistan, but I'm not him anymore. And then you're free of suffering, and you're free to live in the present moment. And if you could do that with everything, you'd be free of everything, because you could say, I can do that. So that's the simple idea, and your audience could do it right now. I mean, it's the next time you get a headache, before you take a pill, you could say, I'm going to bring all my attention to headache, and say, headache, what have you come to share with me about tension? And headache will start to talk with you. And you could say, headache, what do you need? And headache will tell you. And then I guarantee you, your headache will go away. I guarantee. Unless there's levels to it. So I'll just finish this up and we'll be done, which is all we have to know is what the real problem is, because sometimes the thing you think is the real problem is a symptom of something deeper. We have to know where it originated, and we have to know what that being needs if just sharing their story while you bear witness isn't enough. That's all you need to know. All right? So if you like, I can give you a weird story about what I mean by that, or I can shut up and you can ask another question.
No, absolutely. I'd love to hear a story. I mean, I think it helps people relate to, what we're learning about.
All right. So let's suppose I find out, let's say you're the same person, and the motorcycle backfires and they have a panic attack, but I find out this time that's not the problem. It's a symptom of a deeper problem. And I've kind of mapped out what those deeper problems could be because they're mythic. And let's say I find out the problem is, the fundamental problem that it's a symptom of is betrayal, and that you were the one who did the betraying, so that you betrayed a trust. And somehow or other, that panic attack is a symptom not of what happened in Afghanistan where you didn't betray a trust, but someplace you betrayed a trust. So I say, Colton, here's the deal. This time we're going to focus on not just panic attack, but we're going to focus on I betrayed a trust, and you're going to tell me what happened in your body. And I also found out, Colton, a way I can explain to you that it is not going to be a story where you're the main character. It's going to be an imaginal story. If you believe in other lifetimes, it's going to be your soul from another lifetime, either through the bloodline or through karma. But we know that any work you've done on that betrayal in this lifetime will not be where it started. Okay? That's all I find out for you. And we found out that that person's going to need to do something other than just share their story, but we don't know what it is yet. So I say, Colton, this time when you're having your panic attack, you're not going to just focus on heart pounding fast. You're going to focus on what happens in the body when you fully let yourself, with all the conviction you can, let yourself say and experience, I betrayed a trust. All right? Now let's suppose you say, this is really weird, Andy. My throat's closing up and I have an excruciating pain in my right foot. Not only do I have an excruciating pain in my right foot, but it never occurred to me to tell you about that because you're a therapist, but I dropped a stone on my right foot 7 years ago. And I've been to all these specialists all over the place, and they say, you should not be limping and still in pain, but they must be missing something because I am still in excruciating pain and I'm still limping. Okay. So it didn't occur to me to tell you. So I say, all right, Colton, here's what you're going to do. You're going to choose to become throat closing up sensation and excruciating pain in right foot. And now we're going to you're going to become that being. And we know you're not going to tell me a story about you. All right. And here's what you say. This is really weird, Andy. I'm the leader of some soldiers, and I can tell this is World War I, and we're in Germany, and I'm leading these soldiers, and I'm getting distracted. And I should be leading them, but they get ahead of me because I get distracted by something. My attention gets distracted. And I watch them walk into a clearing, and suddenly they're in an ambush. And bombs are falling out of the sky like they've been waiting for them, and grenades are going off, and I'm watching my men all get wounded and killed and everything. And I'm trying to scream at them, but nothing is coming out of my mouth. And I'm just watching all this. And I don't want them to think I'm a bad leader. So I take out my pistol and I shoot myself in the foot, hoping that they'll think that I get hit by shrapnel. And so I'm there in excruciating pain, and I'm watching the whole thing happen. Okay? That's my story. So I say, all right, I understand. So now we know why it is that you're having panic attacks around loud sounds, all right? Even though you've been in Afghanistan. Okay, so I say, here's your problem. You believe you betrayed all those men, so we're going to find their soul. So the soul of all of them or one of them, and we're going to talk with them, and we're going to say, we're going to find out, without you defending yourself or doing anything else, you're going to ask them what it was like for them. So you find their souls and you say, oh my God, I think they're going to scream at me or whatever. And they're laughing, they're having a party. And they say, we forgave you 100 years ago. We had to learn that just because we weren't being led, we weren't supposed to just wander off like lemmings. We had to learn how to take responsibility for ourselves. So we forgave you ages ago, at which point you let out a sigh. Okay. And you say, oh, all right. Now I will tell you something unbelievable, which is if the only reasons for these things, because there can be layers to them, right? If the only reason for your panic attack and your OCD, right, and the way you describe your OCD is, if I make a mistake, the sky will fall, so I have to do everything perfectly. And you have ADHD and you have attention deficit disorder and you feel guilty about it, but no one can explain to you why. And you have this excruciating pain in your right foot that no one understands why that's there either, and it's been unresponsive to treatment. And you say, every time I have a leadership opportunity, I shoot myself in the foot. If that was the only reason for those things, and if you said, also, I had to learn something about being more responsible in my own life, And if that was the only reason for those things, I will tell you something. In a half hour, your chronic pain that nothing has touched will go away. I've seen this on multiple occasions. Your OCD will go away. Your panic attacks will go away. Your ADHD will go away. And your shooting yourself in the foot every time you have a leadership opportunity will go away. And not only that, you've been working in ways that are really cutting edge in what happened to you in Afghanistan, right? And you're doing something called emotional freedom technique, or what's called EMDR, or you're trying, I don't know if you know these things, but there are all these like cutting edge interventions that you can do for things like trauma, but they're not really working. And the reason they weren't working was you say, I just learned an amazing lesson. I unconsciously put myself back into Afghanistan in the role that those soldiers were, because I wanted to have an empathic experience of what it was like being on the other side. And the only way I could do it unconsciously was to end up in the situation they were in when I was leading them 100 years ago. And then all of the panic that was associated with what happened to you in Afghanistan that you've been working on forever goes away too.
I mean, it sounds like there is, aspects of like a meditation. There's a lot of, kind of like mental practice that goes into like imagining the situation. And I mean, it's very interesting. I'm intrigued to see like.
Okay. Anybody can do it. They can do it the first time I see them. You come in and you say, I'm anxious. Okay. I say, all right, Colton, when you're a simple version. Colton, scan your body. Let yourself fully experience anxiety. Tell me what you feel in your body. I guarantee you will feel something. Even if you say, I'm not feeling anything, then I'll say, Colton, where are you feeling in your body? I'm not feeling anything. And you'll be able to tell me, because that's a feeling. It's called the feeling is not feeling. So I haven't had one person in 30 years yet who couldn't find a sensation, right? Now, here's the key. As soon as you focus on the sensation, we know Colton isn't saying anything. So Colton doesn't matter anymore. All I'm going to say to Colton is, your job is to become that sensation, and then you're going to say whatever comes to you. And I'll say, let's say you're anxious. I'll say, all right, let's say you say, I'm feeling nothing. And I say, where are you feeling nothing? You say, I'm feeling nothing in my head. And I say, feeling nothing in head. What have you come to share about anxiety? Where are you beginning? What's happening? All right, Colton, you're going to tell a story. Once upon a time, you will either see something if you're visual, or you'll start to live out something if you're kinesthetic, or you'll start to like, I think I know what the story is if you're auditory, but like reading a novel, watching a movie, or being in a play. Now, I will also tell you, I've done this for 30 years, and I haven't found one person who hasn't been able to do it the first time I told them. So it doesn't take any work at all. It's just we're not used to doing it. And anybody can do it, and they can learn it really fast. So I can tell you, my experience for 30 years doing this 30 hours a week is it's no work at all. All you have to do is like suspend disbelief.
Well, and there's a bit of mindset going into that, right? Like you've got to kind of change your mindset about what you're experiencing, because you're like, I have to stop being me and I have to start being, whatever my experience is right now.
That's true, but I will tell you something. You're suffering. My job is to give you a way out of suffering. So I'm going to say, Colton, let me explain to you why you're suffering about anxiety. There's something you couldn't handle that couldn't be handled. It might not be you. It's playing out as anxiety, which is a clue. And here's how you're going to solve it. You're unconsciously living out someone else's story. Find them, choose to become them, and then say whatever comes to you. It's not very complicated. I mean, it's really not complicated. You can do it with a 3-year-old. You can do it with anybody of any. I've seen the widest. I've seen, evangelical Christians and total atheists. It doesn't matter. Because if you're suffering, my job is to say, I think I have a way out of your suffering. What have you got to lose except for your suffering? Why not try it once and see what happens? If you're suffering enough, believe me, you'll try it once. And I say to you, I'll make you a guarantee. If you try it once and it doesn't work, I'll give you your money back. I don't give that guarantee. I used to give it to everybody, but no one ever asked for the money back because it changes literally right away.
Well, and it seems like, that ability to, I guess, associate so specifically on something is kind of what's missing in a lot of modern psychologies. We try and look at everything as one whole system. And you're like, stop looking at the whole system, start looking at small parts.
I'm saying the small part is a way into the whole system. I mean, think about the story I told you. It would never occur to you that the reason that you were having panic attacks was that you were leading a group of soldiers in Germany in 1917. So you could say life is revealing something to you that if you became like an empty vessel and say, I wonder what you're inviting me into, you'll see where your awareness goes. So in a funny way, by focusing on your awareness on something very particular, it opens you up to everything. Whereas if you focus on everything, you'll never find the thing you needed to find in the first place.
Oh, I like that. It seems like somebody who feels like they have a lot of chronic problems could almost make this into their own book of, like these were all of my experiences that got me through to being a healthier me.
That's exactly true. And that's my book is a lot of first person accounts. I mean, if I want to give an example of a pattern, I will do it. But most of the book is people who said, like, I've been in this major depression my whole life. And I found a story of a traumatic death in another lifetime. And the depression I've been working on for 7 years in therapy, with the good therapy that wasn't going away. And my suicidality went away in a moment because I had this horrific death and I was living out a horrific death story, but nobody ever thought of it. And it's all of these people who I've seen and other people have seen, and they've written their own story. I had them write. I said, like, why should I write about you? You're the expert. So you write about yourself. And, and I didn't actually even look for the most dramatic stories. I tried to find some I tried to give a wide range and some of the stories are really dramatic and other stories are like, and some symptoms have so many layers to them that you can have one symptom. Like one woman wanted to have a blood draw. And she said, she was in a graduate program. She said, I'll never get through it because torture me before I get a blood draw. It took us almost a year for her to be able to get the blood draw. It had so many layers, starting with a horrific case of repressed sexual incest. Because if you think what's a blood draw, metaphorically, right? In this case, a man is sticking something into you against your will, who is more powerful than you do, and he sticks it into your body and blood comes out and you're in terror. That's where we started. And it was very poignant for that woman because she actually, the most powerful thing about that, this woman was a very high-powered businesswoman who had left it all to go and study in a seminary. And she said, if I'm going to ask them to face their demons, I have to face my own. And that came up for her when I was just learning how to do this. This is now 30 years ago. And it took us 6 sessions to get through that repressed memory of really horrific sexual abuse. And she had to go to every one of her professors and say, I have to take incomplete. This woman had never gotten anything laid in her whole life. And when we got done with the whole thing and the sexual abuse and her own abuse of power in other lifetimes and so many things you couldn't imagine, she said the most powerful thing was I had to be able to go to those professors and say, I just can't do this. I have to really look out. I have to focus on, I have to remember my own healing before I can even, do this. So that was a case where it was one symptom and it took forever.
Well, and I think that's one of those that people, as much as we want like instant gratification, we want to say like, well, I can solve this, this problem that I've had for years right now. You're like, maybe you can, or maybe like it's going to take a little bit of work and you're going to have to, learn to understand yourself more than just like, give me a pill and solve my problem.
Well, either way, I'm not going to just give you a pill and solve your problem because the pill isn't going to solve your problem. Although pills do move energy. I mean, everything moves energy, but the pill won't solve your problem. And it probably won't, it may get rid of your symptom, but it won't get rid of what's underneath it you're trying to learn through the symptom anyway. The other thing is that sometimes people who've worked on things forever, like the person with a panic attack because of what happened in Afghanistan that he repressed, that can go away. I mean, if it can happen in a moment, why can't it go away in a moment? You know what's going on. It just depends on what you're working on. Symptoms tend to be easy. If you want to grow up and become truly free, like say, I can handle the things I'm most afraid to experience about myself, that can take a long time because there are layers and layers of things that we're afraid to experience. Symptoms that seemingly are unresponsive to treatment, like chronic pain, for example, that no one knows why it's there, I will almost definitely guarantee if nobody can tell you why your chronic pain is there, but you have it, but all your specialists say they can't, you're going to be in a story someplace and it's trying to help you remember the story. And it's typically going to be a story most often of a traumatic death where you had something horrific happen to your body or something like the betrayal story that I told you about. But you're going to be reliving the echo of something that, of course, you'll say it was just an accident. I had a woman who was in a terrible accident. She got knocked over by a wave, and she had been in chronic back pain for 7 years. And we found out that the story of what being knocked over by a wave was an exact echo of something that happened 2,000 years ago, where she felt like she betrayed hundreds of men. And when she found the betrayal story and changed it, it was fascinating because when I did the work with her, she said, I'm going to have to do this standing because if I sit for a few minutes, my back starts totally tightening up. So we do the story and she finds out, you can see exactly how that being knocked over by the wave and hitting a rock was a total echo of a worse story that happened 2,000 years ago, where she hadn't made the connection. We took care of the person 2,000 years ago, and she was tired. She sat down, and she starts talking to people for over an hour. Then she says, wait a second, I have no back. And I saw her 3 weeks later, and because she wanted to, part of her story was being over-responsible. She said she kept this out. She said, I haven't had back pain since.
That's very interesting. And it seems like, when I came into this, I was like, well, what conditions or what, kinds of trauma are going to be the hardest to resolve? Like they sink their teeth in a little deeper. And it seems like it's not even necessarily like one event trauma. It seems like it is, a string of things with a lot of layers.
It depends. Sometimes it's a string of things with a lot of layers, and sometimes it's a one event thing that no one ever would have thought of. The one event ones that no one ever thought of that have dramatic symptoms are those are the ones that look biblical, right? I saw a woman who had been psychiatrically hospitalized over and over and over again because of something called dissociative identity disorder with psychotic features. Dissociative identity disorder is multiple personality. She couldn't account for time and she had bugs crawling all over her. And so she kept getting hospitalized. And I found out what that was about with her, which is a very strange story. And she had a horrific history. Horrific. She had been incested. She had been raped. She had watched her mother shoot her sister with bad history, right? We found out it was none of those things. I found out that in our field, it was something called the superimposition, which is a dark energy that takes you over, however you want to understand it, literally or not. Well, I said to her, does that make any sense to you that the reason that you might have your whole field, because what's multiple personality, we're all multiple personalities, but usually there's somebody there witnessing the whole thing, whereas if you have multiple personalities, one comes forward, the next one comes forward, we're all multiple personalities, but like most of the time, there's a container. So something totally broke a container. That's how I understand multiple personalities. That's not standard. All right. And the psychosis. So I said, does that make any sense to you? And this is a woman who was multinational, turns kind of white and says, I know exactly what you're talking about. Because when I was 8 years old, I was at my father's fire and brimstone. Her father was a Southern Baptist preacher. She says, I was at the sermon and this dark cloud came over me and I felt really weird. So the next day, I think it was the next day, this is 30 years ago, she went to a psychiatrist because she was obviously already having problems because of things no one was talking about. And she told him what happened. And she reported that he said that you're crazy and put her on Thorazine. At which point she said, I will never tell anybody again. So now it's 30 years later. And I said, does this make any sense to you? Because she was a very good reporter when she was her core personality and, wasn't totally caught up in the bugs that were crawling all over her. So I said, all right, that 8-year-old is here. You could find her that's being taken over. We do not want you to be the demonic energy that's taking her over. We want you to be the 8-year-old who's being taken over. So just notice what happens to your body. I don't know what she says. Okay. She starts to relive it. It says she knows what to do about this, she thinks that's hysterically funny. And she said, I'm supposed to do this dance. She's 1/16th Native American. She's just getting interested in this stuff. She said, I'm supposed to do this dance. Now, if you saw this woman, you would think that was hysterically funny because this woman does not dance. And she starts to do the most amazing dance. And I could tell with the beat she was doing because she was making circles around a circle. And it was unbelievably intricate. Like this woman is being danced. She does it for a minute. She looks up at me like, what am I doing? She had this face on. I was like, what? And she keeps going. And about a minute later, you can feel the room kind of shake if you're attuned to it. And most people would have been able. And the room literally gets lighter. She says, I'm done. Now, I kept seeing her because she had a lot of other problems other than this. But that went away right away. And eventually she and I both moved. And I saw her 25 years later because we ended up in the same doctor's office. We recognized each other. And she came up to me and she says, I want you to know I was never psychiatrically hospitalized again after that session.
That's really intense. And it kind of reminds me, I've been hearing this thing lately, and I don't know, where its bearing is in psychology or whatnot, but people have been talking about spirit keeping. Mm-hmm. And they're like, I have these either metaphorical, literal, whatever it is, spirits with me.
Mhm.
And like they help me to resolve things, in my everyday life. I'm like, well, it kind of sounds like you're leaning on yourself a little bit for this to like, your belief in these spirits like is guiding you to do better for yourself.
What I would say, because I know people who do that, and some of them think that they are actually in relationship with archangels, and some of them believe that really it's what we might call their higher self that's revealing itself through something that feels like a separate angelic being. From my point of view, it's an interesting philosophical question, but I say to people, what you believe is up to you. If it's useful to you, who cares? And if it isn't useful to you, then in a different way, who cares? So, like, if you're interested in having the conversation about, if there are other lifetimes or not, I can certainly have that conversation with you. But if you're that soldier in Germany in 1917 and your panic attacks and your chronic pain goes away, you think you're going to care if it's literally true or not? Probably not. But like, I think someone's belief structures are none of my business. So if they say, well, you're leaning on yourself. No, they say, no, I can see this angelic being. Okay. Who knows? So I say, you get to decide what that means for you, whoever you are. You're the expert. You're the one who has the angelic being. And if you think it's your higher self and it's really just in a form, but it's really you, right? And if you think it's Archangel Gabriel channeling amazing wisdom to you, right?
Well, it seems like it all requires, a bit of a suspension of disbelief. It's the same thing when we're watching a movie, right? Like we have to be involved in the movie and not aware that we're watching a movie because it degrades the experience. In the same way, this is like, if you have to suspend your disbelief to believe, you're the soldier in World War I or, you're someone 2,000 years ago, like either way, if that helps you to get to where you're going, that's also good.
Yeah, but the thing is, you're suspending your disbelief about something that you're finding yourself, right? Like, if I say to you, like, you've repressed what happened in Afghanistan, for example, and I say, all right, focus on heart pounding fast, and you say, oh my God, I know what's going on here. Bombs are going. All right, what you're suspending disbelief about is, in a sense, that you could find what's going on because consciously you've tried to figure it out, but you can't. So you have to say that someplace within you, there's information both about what happened to you and the one who could find it that you may not consciously have access to, but that doesn't mean it isn't there. However you want to make sense of it. So all we're doing is saying there's a part of you that knows what's going on, and there's a part of you that experienced what was going on, and all you have to do is focus on them as opposed to focus on the one we call Colton, who doesn't have a clue, but thinks he does. It takes you like Andy, who also doesn't have a clue but thinks he does, right? All the same thing. So yeah, you have to suspend disbelief because, like, what's the choice? If you have chronic back pain and nothing's touched it, and everyone's telling you, it can't be there, but it's there, then you have to believe in something else.
Well, and that's kind of the beauty of this is it's like, there's no harm in it. Like you could do this as much as you want. And if it like helps you, it helps you. And if it doesn't, it's not like it's going to set you back anywhere either.
I would say to you, from my humble point of view, free will is one thing. When you're suffering, are you going to choose to find the thing that you are, the reactive part of you, or are you just going to live it out? Everything else, from my point of view, is like, we're just living a dream. So the question is, are we going to become aware of the dream we're living, or are we just going to live it? The choice you have is, you could say, I could discover what it is. I could bring my awareness to it and like get really open and get open-minded and open-hearted and just be open and see what reveals itself to me. If I let go of my own agenda and say, life is trying to share something with me, and life, we know, is a lot bigger than I. And it's all there. We have access to all of it. I mean, if you think about it, Colton, well, who are we really, right? On the face of it, I mean, if you think about the mystical idea of it, if you think about cells and bodies, right? We have 3 trillion cells. On the face of them, all of them are different and all of them have their own role to play, right? But underneath it, called the DNA, you could take one cell and you could create its whole universe. So everything that ever happened, is happening, and potentially could happen, is there for that cell to know. Because it is in relationship to the whole body, but it, on one level, is the whole body. Well, you could say who we are is cells, right, in the living body of a being, an evolving being called life. And the equivalent of DNA is soul. So you could say, as a soul, you have access to everything that has ever happened, is happening, and potentially could happen, just like DNA. It's just most of us never think that, so we think we identify with the surface. Then we say, look at that thing over there. That's not me. But of course it is you. You know, when they say love your neighbor as yourself, it's true, except your neighbor is your neighbor, but your neighbor is also yourself. Has to be. And the second you really know that, not in your head, but in your whole being, how could you ever cause harm?
Well, and that kind of reminds me that like scope is very important, right? You know, like you said, inside of each of these cells is their own universe worth of information. And you look at us and we're like, yeah, I'm one person. And you're like, well, kind of like you're 3 trillion things that make up one shape. That's accurate. And it's like we're all, 8 billion people on a big rock, and that makes up one thing. And this rock is part of, our solar system and our galaxy and our whatever. Like it expands just kind of infinitely up and down.
Right. And the great teaching is we're both. The teaching of all the great teachers says, as they say in Casablanca, the problems of 3 little people, right? But it's also true that we're all of them. I mean, the great teaching of the great Andrew Hahn, the great Vietnamese monk, he said, what I had to learn was, I'm not just the person who's being killed by the soldiers, I'm the soldiers who are doing the killing. And I have to say I'm all of it. And if I'm all of it, how can I judge any of it? Be judgmental of it. I could be discerning about it. I could say, I'm going to stop you. But the second we become judgmental of people, then we're just doing to them what we think they're doing to everybody else.
Well, it's very important to kind of take this and learn, like, no matter what is in your past, who you were, what you associate with, where these problems come from, you can only be you from this moment into the next. That's it.
And then the question is, do you know that the you is Colton, who gets to do his differentiated thing, because Colton gets to run this podcast, probably in a way that no one else in the world will. But Colton also is everyone who's ever on the podcast will be, and everything else, including the bricks behind his head, if it's a true vision. He's all, and he's particular. And when you know that you are self-aware, everything, and self-aware in particular, what's life about? It's to know that who I am is everything, and everything is who I am, so why would I judge anything? But it's also to know that I have my own particular role to play in the evolution of this whole thing. I think that's really, you want to know what I think life is about. It's being able to hold those two things at once with a place of awareness. So do you say, I'm self-aware everything, as opposed to I'm just everything. And in self-aware everything, I get to play my particular role that nothing else could play. Because you'll never find 2 of those cells, of those 3 trillion cells, on the surface that are the same. They each have something to do if nothing gets in the way, called, they're stuck in the past someplace because of the trauma. And then what they have to do is heal their trauma. That's the third thing we have to do. Get free, right? Because as long as there's something you can't take in stride, what your life is asking you to do is to say, be in a different relationship with it. So you could say, I'm remembering what happened, but it isn't who I am. I don't have an idea. All I am is the experience.
Well, I love that. And I think that's a great message to leave people with. But I want to make sure if people are looking, they can find more from you and from your book. So why don't you tell them where to get it?
Sure. The book is called The 1 Hour Miracle. And that was our agent's choice of title. And we have some thoughts about that title, both good and bad, but it's called The 1 Hour Miracle. So, and it really, if you just read the first few chapters, you'll really get a sense of where we're coming from. And it's really fun. I mean, it's a really fun book to read. And I will say, because of my co-author, who is an extraordinary human being and had never written a book and never edited a book. And we found the best editor in the world that we thought, right? And she signed off on the book, and my co-author said, it's not done. And she said, we have to re-edit it. And she went through the whole thing with me, and we went through it all together. We gave it back to our editor, and she said, I thought this was a great book before I thought it was finished. You guys have made the best book for reading I've ever read. And this woman said that to us. And it's a really great book to read. And mostly I have to say that's her author, whose name is Joni Beckett. whose name is on the book. The 1 Hour Miracle, you can get it, on Amazon in any way, shape, or form you like. If you like Amazon, and if you like local booksellers, maybe they'll have it, I can't say. Our work is called Life-Centered Therapy. And if you want to work, you can't work with me, but we have all kinds of people I've trained, and I supervise all of them. And we have certified people who qualified themselves. But if you go to lifecenteredtherapy.com, you'll see that you can make a consultation and you can work with us. And because we can do this remotely, you could be on the moon and we can still work with you. Or if you live nearer to us, you can come in live. So that's what you need to know. And all I'm doing right now in the world is I just want the world to know about this because people are suffering. They don't know about these things. And it's the simplest thing in the world if you know what it is. But if you don't know what it is, like Einstein said, you can explain relativity to a smart third grader if you have a different worldview when you say things aren't absolute, they're in relationship with each other. That changes everything. Kind of the same thing. I can explain this in an 8-year-old will say, this makes total sense. But until it makes total sense, it doesn't make total sense.
Absolutely. Well, I will drop links for the book and for the website into the show notes. If people are looking, it's really easy. Just drop down and click them. If you do pick up this book online, wherever it's from, please leave good reviews. That helps other people find books like this.
Oh, I am just and please leave good reviews for Colton's show also, wherever you are on Apple or Spotify or wherever you find him. Because Colton, you're a pleasure. I mean, talking with you is just, I'm sure other people tell you this, you're a joy and you're a lovely interviewer and you've made this a great experience. So thank you. So write a review for him and write a review for our book and we'll both be eternally indebted.
Thank you very much. And thank you so much for spending your time with us. I've appreciated your time immensely. And likewise, I appreciate your time as an audience listening to this show. I hope people give this quick therapy style a shot, even if it's with a shrug and a scowl. You never know what works until you try. In other news, November is basically over, and here's our rankings. Number 1, the United States, with Oregon, California, and Texas taking medals. Number 2, England of the United Kingdom. Number 3, Australia, with Western Australia still out front. Besties in the Westies indeed. Number 4, Canada, with Ontario taking over. And number 5, Ghana, still just barely leading India. That's it for this week. Have a great week, a great weekend, and I'll see you all back here next week for another new episode. Until the next episode, pretty pleased with all those things that help the show grow, like rating, reviewing, liking, and subscribing. Remember, you can reach out to me personally at dumbenoughpodcast@gmail.com or on any of the social medias. But most importantly, stay dumb.